Hello there, I'm Doc Sholo, and today we're going to talk about poultry record keeping. Okay, first off, poultry records should be easy to maintain. They should be simple to understand. They are not repetitive, and they should contain all vital information. Okay, so if your only means of maintaining records is through pen and paper, then by all means keep some records because the purpose of this video is to tell you how important records are. Okay, also your records should be simple to understand. Okay, so that it would not be only you who is able to understand your records, as well as any person, or for example, your consultant, who needs to analyze your records. Okay. Also, your records should not be repetitive. If, for example, a form already contained information on the date of chick loading, as well as the total price you paid for the chick, going to ask a question. Would that information be important if you also included that in a sheet that's located in your hen house? Okay, I guess information on the costs, as well as the uh, anything that's related to financial should be included in the management records. But for example, if records need to be kept inside the hen house, this should include only pertinent information such as the date of loading, the number of chicks, also the types of chicks that are loaded. Okay, so which brings me to the last part, which is records should contain all vital information. Okay, at least vital to the person that's using it. Like for example, the poultryman, or the person who is assigned to the hen house. He should have knowledge of when the chicks were loaded, as well as the total number of birds, so that he should be able to keep an accurate inventory, as well as the types of feed that are being given to the chicks at that time. Okay, we now move on to the importance of poultry record keeping. Okay, so what are the importance of record keeping in poultry? Okay, number one is to make critical financial decisions, as well as to help us in creating a budget. Next is to make important feeding decisions, especially on the inventory of feed, types of feed, and the effectiveness of the specific feed ration. Next importance is to help us to identify errors in production. After that, another importance would be to determine productivity of your birds, such as the number of eggs produced, kilograms of meat, both of which aids in culling selection. Next importance is that records aid in the breeding of birds and the identification of the most productive birds. And then another importance would be to compare your production performance with the breed standards. And then lastly, to maintain production records for assessments in financial institutions. Okay, let's discuss the importances that we have. Okay, so to make critical financial decisions, as well as creating a budget. Okay, for example, your farm has several production types. Of course, cash is never unlimited. In production, you always have to budget, budget, budget. Okay, so records, they are important in order to prioritize which items need to be addressed first, and which items or equipment or supplies or need to be addressed at a later time when the budget eases. Okay, so that's why it's important to maintain records. Okay, next, to make important feeding decisions. Okay, especially on the inventory of feed, types of feed, and effectiveness of the specific feed ration. For example, going back to the one that I mentioned just a while ago, if your farm maintains several production types, for example, you are doing a grow out or day zero birds, you're trying to grow them to ready to lay pullets. Okay, and at the same time, you are also maintaining layers. Okay, and it would be important for you to know how many bags of feed are still available, how many bags of feed are needed to be produced, for example, for a specific production type. For example, you should check an inventory of your feeds for your grow out operation, because it's important that these birds do not miss out on the nutrients that they need in order to prepare them for their future role. For example, if you are preparing them for the layer operation, or for example, it's also important if they are for broiler production. Okay, because if these birds miss out on eating, then it would definitely affect the final product. Okay, so not only the bags of feed, but also the types of feed. It's critical that you have an inventory of the types of feed. You shouldn't be reactive, rather, you should be proactive. Okay, you should be one step ahead, because you don't know when there will be setbacks in your operation, like force majeure, earthquakes, typhoon, okay, unnatural conditions. Okay, who would have thought that COVID would affect our lives? But say, for example, you have already stocked your warehouse with several feeds, at least for the next few weeks, then I guess you wouldn't have much of a problem. Okay. Also, another importance of this would be, for example, if you're conducting a feeding trial. Okay, so, it's important that you conduct a feeding trial. You shouldn't be stagnant on your production. Okay? Not unless you're bound by a contract to feed only what feed the company will provide. Okay, so for example, you're running the show, then it's important that you conduct a feeding trial. Okay. Next importance of feed is it helps to identify. The importance of records would be it helps to identify errors in production. Okay, for example, if you are maintaining weights of your birds, okay, it would be much more advantageous to you if you weigh your birds weekly rather than at the end of production. Okay. Why weekly? What's so advantageous about weighing weekly? Okay. So weighing weekly, it is important because you also need to obtain information on your bird standards. Or for example, you're maintaining the shaver breed of bird. Okay, you need to know how much your birds gained in terms of weight after a week, so that you can compare it with the breed standard. Okay. Okay. It is important so that you can make adjustments for the following week. For example, an adjustment would be, for example, it is time for a transition from a chick booster to a chick starter. But when you look at your records, it seems that your birds have fallen short of the required weight for the first week. Then all factors or all things that contributed to that should be checked. Is it the weather? Is it the stress in loading? Is it the new guy that you hired to take care of the poultry house? Okay, so if you've eliminated all the problems regarding that, then you should check on your records. Okay, maybe you have fallen short just because you have given less feeds to a house that's supposed to have 10 more bags of feed. Okay, all right, so it's important to keep records to identify the errors in your production. Okay, next importance is to determine the productivity of your birds. Okay, we should keep records such as the number of eggs, the kilograms of weight that our birds have gained. Okay, why is it important? Okay, in an operation, what you can do is identify all these birds that have fallen short. Okay, and then you should give special attention to them. Okay, these birds that have lighter weight should be put in front of the hen house. Okay, the ones that are heavier can be maintained at the far end of the hen house. Why? So that your poultry man or the person who's taking care of the house can provide tender, loving care to these birds. Okay, and the mere fact that they're put in front means a certain importance is being provided to them. Okay, all right, they are not neglected. Okay, all right. Now, another importance would be to aid us if, for example, we are going to breed the birds. Okay, weight records, they help us in the identification of the most productive birds. For would you be breeding birds that are lighter as compared to breeds which are heavier? Another thing is, would you be breeding birds that are late in achieving the target weight as compared to birds who have achieved the target weight in just a short span of days? Okay, these are the things that you need to consider when you need to breed birds. Therefore, it is important that you, as a manager or a veterinarian, check your records. Okay, this one I've mentioned already to compare your production with the standards for the breed. Okay, like what I said, you need to check if your weekly performance is at par with the weight gain during the first week. Because if it is not, if it falls short, then it must mean that there is something wrong with the chick loading or the type of feed that you're giving, or maybe you should go ahead and check your water supply if the water that the birds are drinking is all right. Okay, because these factors they have to be checked, okay, so that we can make adjustments for the following week. Okay. Next is to maintain production records for assessments in financial institutions. Okay, let's say for example, you need additional capital for a another type of production that you are planning to add to your already existing production. Let's say you're already doing a grow out. Okay, and then you're also doing a layer operation at the same time, and then suddenly your business manager realized that it's time for you to go ahead and mill your own feeds. Okay, and then for example you would need to secure that loan. Some financial institutions like banks, they would refer to your production records just to check if you are really uh, doing your best in terms of production, if you are not a bad debt brother. Okay, if you are able to pay them, if your business really pays off, or if you are really a legit producer. Okay, so much for importance. Now let's go to the methods of record keeping. Okay, so the two methods of record keeping, we have hand recording and computer recording. Okay, for hand recording, this one is easy to create, pen and paper, and then you could write down information on the date of chick loading, number of birds loaded. Okay, and then this method is, of course, it has a low initial cost with only your pen and paper. Okay, and of course, your filing folders, you need that. And then, of course, you need the place to keep all these records to make them accessible. Next up, we have computer recording. Okay, so the advantages of computer recording, there is no paper trail. I believe that it is much organized or easily accessible as compared to hand recording. For example, if you are using a sheet, information sheet, such as Google Sheet and Microsoft Excel, you can just do a Control F. For example, if you're looking for a specific date of production or a specific column. Okay, and then another advantage of computer recording is that they can be available online. Again, a disclaimer on this, it might not be true for all, but Google Sheet is available online. Okay, you don't need to actually send a whole file to someone who needs to review the records. All you need to do is just share the link so that they could open it on their computer. Okay, another advantage, sorry, of computer recording is that analysis can be easily generated. Okay, for example, you need to take the average. You don't need to input every figure that you obtain. You just need to perform a simple averaging in a particular block or a cell. Okay, and then also you can get information such as the median, as well as the highest figure attained, as well as the lowest figure attained. Okay, with that you can make graphs to help you better understand your production. Okay, so next we'll talk about the classification of chicken farming records. So the three types that I have here, there are management records, financial records, production records. Okay. First, let's start with management records. Okay. Management records should include vaccination records. Okay. So what information is included here? They should include the number, date, and type of vaccines that you have administered. This should also include the lot numbers, okay, the batch numbers, the expiry dates. Okay, this is important to formulate the vaccination schedule of your farm. Okay, this is also important. For example, you need to look back and check if for example, when a disease occurred in your farm, and then you also need to look back at when you provided the specific vaccination against that disease. Okay, also part of management records would be your feeding records. Okay, this would include the types of feeds as well as the number of sacks. As I've mentioned, okay, the birds need to feed and you need to be one step ahead. For example, if there would be no delivery of feeds, at least you have something in buffer. Okay, so you have something to feed them. Okay? Because it would totally affect your production if, for example, they missed out on eating. Okay, also part of management records would be mortality records. Okay, what it should contain would be information on the number of deaths as well as loss, as well as the reasons for the loss. Okay, for example, if the typhoon hit your operation, okay, so how many birds died because the hen house crashed? Okay, for example, if during the night your hen house was uh, well attacked by a feral animal, how many birds were killed during that attack? So you would need it to assess if your production has failed because of your type of management, or is it because of an accident or things that you did not expect. Okay. Also important in management records are chick records. Okay, this would include the date of the chick loading, or the date when they were first delivered to your farm for you to grow. Okay, that's day zero, as well as the number of chicks that were loaded. Okay, you should also be, for example, if you are maintaining a grow out for layer, you should be able to count how many rejects you have. For example, how many male chicks you have. Okay, how many chicks are sick upon loading. Okay, so that you can haggle with the company you ordered the chicks from. Okay. Next, we have management practices records. This is also part of management records. So, what am I talking about? This would include information such as beak trimming, deworming, culling, as well as disease incidents and the control measures that you use against those diseases. Okay. The beak trimming, this is important because after doing this management practice, oftentimes the feed consumption of your birds fall. Okay. So if, for example, somebody was reviewing the feeding records and then they noticed a drop in the feed consumption during that time, then you would be able to attribute it to the date of beak trimming. Okay. Also, culling. Usually, if you actively cull your hen house or your flock, then oftentimes feed consumption efficiency, as well as FCR, okay, they would reflect better figures. Okay. All right, so much for management records. Now let's go to financial records. Okay, so financial records, they should contain all financial transactions of your production. Okay, it's important to contain feed expenditures as well as day-old chicks. Okay, they should also include records of items sold or bought, including supplies and equipment. Okay, you should be including everything here. Okay, for example, if you needed to set up a new disinfecting vat, or for example, if you need to buy a wheel sprayer, you need to buy extra equipment for your farm, you need to include it here. Okay, because these are all parts of production. Okay, next is, like I mentioned, make sure to include all the cost. For example, this would be not in terms of supplies and equipment, but in logistics. For example, if you are the one shipping your bird to slaughterhouses or the market, then you should be also including the cost of transport of birds. Okay, so much for financial records. Now we move on to production records. Okay, this should include information such as daily or weekly weight gain to monitor productivity. Okay, this information should be used to compare your records to a standard. Okay, adjustments can then be made to your feeding program if needed. I have already mentioned this earlier. Okay, you should be able to weigh your birds weekly so that you'd be able to make adjustments for the following week if it is needed. Okay. As I've said, weekly weighing minimizes losses. Okay. Some farmers, they only weigh at the slaughter time. However, the best way to counter losses is to weigh your birds weekly so that the problems are countered as they appear. Okay. Right. In layer production, the records they must also include the dates of loading, the eggs produced daily, okay, the day-to-day sales, okay, sale of broken shelled eggs, as well as the pullet eggs. Okay, everything. That's essentially everything. Everything that you're able to sell at half the price or sell at the optimum price, you have to include it in your record. Okay, because this is important to assess if your production is good or if it needs improvement. All right, that's it for record keeping in poultry.